This is gonna be controversial. This is gonna be real controversial, but I don't care. I gotta get this off my chest, and I gotta let y'all know I cannot go into 2025 with people who are still looking forward to their daily horoscope. I can't do it. This war we fighting, I need some intercessors. Y'all over here carrying around sage? Y'all still got rose quartz. I get it. I used to have the rose quartz in my bra. Like, I'm gonna find me a nigga today. Yeah, this rose quartz, this rock gonna bring me my husband. I get it. I have been there. But what I'm saying is, I'm not there anymore. And nothing against the people who believe in that. Just as for me and what I need in my life, I don't need a tool. I need the blood. So if you ain't covered in the blood, hey, you can't go into next year with me talking about did you read your daily microscope? I don't give a damn about what the horoscope say about Aries. What does Matthew 2 and 2 say? Can you pray? All them rocks, all them rocks and herbs. Do you know the Bible? Yeah, I'm leaving that in 2024.
B.Simone, on behalf of all spiritualists everywhere, we don't care who you bring into 2025.
Get what it is. Higher learning with the spiritual rebels. Get what it is. Higher learning with the spiritual rebels. Get what it is. Higher learning with the spiritual rebels. You gonna get this higher learning with the spiritual rebels. What it is. Higher learning with the spiritual rebels. Get what it is. Higher learning with the spiritual rebels. Get what it is. Higher learning with the spiritual rebels. You gonna get this higher learning with the spiritual rebels.
Welcome to the Spiritual Rebels Higher Learning. You've come to the place where viral meets spirituality. Don't forget, subscribe and hit that notification bell for all of our new videos and uploads. Now sit back, relax. It's time to get rebellious.
She wanted to bring the blood into 2025.
We don't care what you bring into 2025 either. We're too busy minding our own damn business. Because true spiritualists are on their own journey and on their own walk. That doesn't involve other people. Bring in who you want, bring in what you want. We just want you to actually be on a real light path and stay on it. I don't hear light path though.
No.
Welcome to the Spiritual Rebels Higher Learning. I am the High Priestess Paige. And Lamar the Gardener is here too. And
hello, we are here. We are here today.
We are trying to sift through the nonsense.
We're trying to sift through the blood.
I can't. I for real.
But get your crystals.
For real can't. I can't
get your crystals and your rocks. We need the blood.
I can't do this. I can't do any of it. Yikes. So you know what we do here on the Spiritual Rebels is we oh gosh, she's throwing me off. We're a show that dissects the viral and reveals the deeper truths that connect us all.
Is that the law? Is that the law of oneness?
Absolutely. It is. It's a law of oneness. And B.Simone is obviously not operating from that law right now. Not sure which law she is operating from, even though she's claiming Christianity.
How about that?
I was born raised Christian. And I recognize mostly what she's doing as doing exactly what she said she wasn't going to be doing, which is judging. It's like it's dry judging.
Yeah. I recognize, it's, a more loose Baptist background. And from that background, I can tell you that's exactly what she's doing.
She's like, by the way, I'm not judging you, but I'm judging you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because let me tell you I'm not judging you and then judge you by putting myself in a seat of sanctity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I don't care what you do. This thing I'm now picking is the thing that is correct over the things that I used to be doing. I mean, beside the fact that rocks and sage are things created by God, I'm not sure what the problem is. Are prayer cloths created by God?
That's actually the interesting part of it to me, because it's like, why, how, that's crazy that y'all over there believing in these, earthly
Man-made objects.
these earthly things that was, that come from source. So
I mean,
that's an interesting take.
A rock and sage, a plant, all these things that already just spring up.
Mm-hmm. Right.
As you said, from God's universe, like right from God's universe.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to something like holy water or prayer cloth that you have to manufacture.
Yeah. Well, the Negridian side of these things, we like to pick and choose what comes from God, and what, God made this for you and me, come from the earth. It come from the earth.
Right. Today what we're trying to talk about, it's gonna be a hard hitter. It's not gonna be an easy thing. And of course, as usual, we'll let you come to your own conclusions after we present what we have to say in our commentary on it. It's up to you what you glean from it. We're just here to pose the questions. And sometimes it's better just to pose a bunch of questions that don't have answers. B.Simone's judgment. Okay, she did ask it if you know what Matthew 2:2 says. Does she know what the book she's talking about, i.e. the Bible, says about judgment? Let's see.
What the Bible says about judging others. Luke 6 verse 37, NLT. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will all come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven.
Alrighty. So it sounds like what she's doing is not condoned by the book she's talking about, right? Is that what you got from that?
Is she only going from one part of the book? Because she going on about the blood, and obviously I'm kind of poking fun at that aspect, but there's a part in the book where the letter, the word is coming from, it's kind of a symbolic, but it's like the blood of Christ, and this is when he's speaking. Is that the only part of the book that she's coming from?
Focused on?
Yeah, because I mean, even then, he, Jesus makes it a point to double down on the forgiving part. So
yeah,
I'm just interested. Is that what's going on here?
Well, again, it shouldn't be, but we're going to talk about later why that's a problem. Let's talk about why now just in this interpretation of judging is a problem, because this person right here is also reading Matthew 7, 1-6. This is what he has to say about misquoting Jesus about not judging others.
So what is the most misquoted saying of Jesus, which is often used to silence Christians from voicing any concerns about current moral and social issues? It's when Jesus said, "Do not judge others." And again, the popular interpretation is that allegedly Christians aren't to make moral judgments. Just accept drag queen story hour for the kiddies, you bigots, so shut up. But is that really what Jesus meant? Do as I say, not as I do, is a saying we use today about someone who lives by a double standard, say a Hollywood actor who piously preaches about climate change, but owns a private jet and yacht. When you actually read Christ's teaching about judging others, that clearly was what he was meaning. Because he went on to say, take the plank out of your own eye before offering to take the speck of sawdust out of someone else's. Jesus didn't teach that we're never to make moral judgments. Rather, he taught that we're not to be hypocritical when doing so. A good rule to live by, both for Christian and non-Christian alike. Subscribe.
Okay, here's the problem with that. All humans are hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
How is it possible for you not be hypocritical when sitting in judgment of someone else when all humans are hypocritical?
By nature.
By nature. And that particular interpretation that he's coming with, where's that at?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where are you getting that from, that's what Jesus meant?
Mm.
He said take the plank out of your own eye, but he said that because he knows all humans are hypocritical.
All humans have a plank in their eye.
All humans have a plank in their eye, pretty much at all times. So let's go back to the original. It's telling you again, you're not in a place to judge anyone on anything. Not really.
Like in this instance, right? Because I don't want to spend too much time on the B.Simone thing, but like in this instance, is she now, the place that she is now, is she now judging her former self?
I'm pretty sure.
Mm.
Yep.
So what happens when she changes her mind and say, because B.Simone is
Exactly.
B.Simone is around my age, so give it another 10 years. What happens then?
What?
A lot of people don't know how we got the Bible at all. We Westerners got the Bible thanks to the Catholic Church. And they took over the books of the Old Testament, which even by the time of Christ had not been finally decided upon by the Jews. The Jews did not close the canon of the Old Testament until the year 100 AD, or thereabouts, at the Synod of Jamnia. And then they finally decided which were the canonical books of the Hebrew Scriptures, and embodied them in the Masoretic text, the earliest copy of which dates from the 10th century, early in the 10th century AD. The books to be included in the New Testament were not finally decided upon until the year 382 AD again, at the Synod of Rome under Pope Damasus. So it was the Church, the Catholic Church.
So now we're talking, this book we're talking about, it wasn't decided on what was canon in this book. For the New Testament. So the first part of it was canonized by the Jewish community.
Right.
Second part of it was canonized by the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be the reason why most people, unless you're like a Jews, part of the Jews for Jesus, it's a thing, Aaron.
Yeah.
The reason why it's a thing is because most the Jewish don't believe in Jesus having been here. So the whole New Testament they throw out. They're working off the Old Testament.
Yeah.
That's a little scary sometimes because of a lot of the things that are in the Old Testament. There's a lot of stuff in there. Just saying.
I mean, well, at least they standing on business, I guess.
But how do you stand on business from everything we just seen?
Yeah.
There's a lot of chaos in this book and surrounding this book and what it's about.
That promulgated the Bible and said, we are giving you these scriptures on our authority and by the authority of...
On whose authority?
On our authority.
Okay. And those would be Catholics, right?
The Catholic men.
Men, got it.
The informal tradition that has existed among us from the beginning, inspired by the Holy Spirit. So you receive historically the Bible on the church's say-so. And the Catholic Church insists, therefore, that the church collectively, speaking under the presumed guidance of the Holy Spirit, has the authority to interpret the Bible. And you can take that or leave it.
I'm going to choose to leave it, Pat. Just saying.
Hindus believe that the Vedas are divinely revealed and inspired with just as much fervor as any Christian or any Jew.
And now you're bringing in the things that we kept talking about. Everybody believes their own belief with as much fire and fervor as the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody believes in their own light path. Or in this case, religious texts, and that's has a light path enveloped into it.
The pattern that you see in a lot of these situations is that, like I said, apparently, the Jews decide to stand on business, but the pattern that I notice is that that's what the focus is on. The focus is on dying behind whatever belief you have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what the focus is on. It's always, if you can't die behind whatever your belief is, then it does, then it's not something to be taken into consideration. And I mean literally dying.
Yeah, like you have to die. Literally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Jesus died literally.
And that's why people stand behind it, like this is like,
But he died literally, but he also technically came back. Which means he reincarnated. Which we'll get to that in a second too. He reincarnated and then ascended.
But you see what I mean? Like, that's crazy. Like, if like how many people in the Bible that aren't talked about, that they believe what they believed and they actually lived,
right, instead of dying.
Yeah, and so what this person talked about wasn't important, or what this person talked about was crazy because
they weren't walking a death path.
Right. Like, it's crazy.
Muslims believe that the Quran is divinely inspired. And some Buddhists believe that their sutras are also of divine, or rather a Buddhic origin.
What do you mean, rather?
It's
what do you mean, rather, my dude? They believe that is divine.
You know how Alan Watts can be with that.
Look, they believe it's divine, my dude. What are you talking about, rather? Like, I can't. They don't understand how much of this is just dripping with their own bullcrap, their own egotism. The ego that in almost every single place in any of these texts is supposed to die. What I never hear any of these religious male figures talking about when they espouse all these things is actually dying. That ego death you're supposed to experience when you take on your belief. Your ego should not be sitting out front anymore. So using this religion that is really supposed to be a light path that you're on, a path and a journey to your spiritual enlightenment and your ultimate ascension, becomes a political tool for your ego.
And you know, it's funny because we of course we're gonna talk about it on this show because that's literally what we do. But the followers of these people who have gone through that transition, the people who follow them aren't going through that, like they aren't having the ego death. You're just following someone who did. That's the wildest part about it too, because they aren't relinquishing any parts of themselves. Not to say that the disciples of Jesus didn't, extradite, themselves and have certain parts of, didn't have to lose certain parts of themselves to follow him. But in most cases, how many of these people are really, following these prophets and having that ego death? They just tagging along.
Yeah, like having the exact same experience that you're supposed to have in the first place.
Yeah, they just tagging along.
Yeah, and that's probably one of our biggest issues with all of this is that this is going to be a big deal because we talk about it almost every week. You're actually using religion to spiritually bypass. Religion is your umbrella. You're hiding up under it. You're not having the experience you're actually supposed to have in any of these instances that at the heart of what they're meant to do.
Right.
Is not happening for you. You 100% are not walking, and that's what we were saying in the beginning with B.Simone. We don't care what light path you're on. We just want you to actually be on one.
Right.
Get on it and be on it. Be about what you say you're about. Be about a light path. Be about following the way, the truth, and the light. Because in our interpretation of what that means is Jesus was not saying that he was the only way. Jesus was saying that the light is the way.
Yeah.
The light is the way. Get on a light path. Stay on it. We don't care. We really don't care. In fact, you don't have to tell us anything about what you're doing. It's personal. For each person is personal. And most of the spiritualists that have responded to B.Simone have said, it's your personal walk. Walk personally. And could you please walk softly?
Right. Yeah.
Like, we're really all supposed to be on a personal walk where spirituality is concerned and where our faith is concerned and where it lies. But instead, what we have is things like what Alan Watts is talking about, because domination and control. Religion is a tool used to dominate and control. Unfortunately, psychologically, humans are, and you talked about it earlier, they fear the unknown. And because so much of what's going on this planet is unknown to you, when you're unhealed and you're not following your own inner knowing, you're terrified. So in order not to be afraid anymore, you need to follow some path.
Yep.
You need to get under some umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to get under some umbrella. What you need to do is you need to tap into your own inner knowing. You need to find ways to light up your own intuition so you know what path you're on. Everybody is on one. You need to figure out what it is. That may or may not include religion. It's a personal thing. Everybody needs something different out of their spiritual walk. That's not up to any group to decide for you. It's what you decide for yourself.
The Japanese believe that the ancient texts of Shinto are likewise of divine origin. And who?
Now, how many of these do we have now? Right.
Right. Right.
And this is what you were saying about what's his name is Aaron. What's his last name again?
I always mess it up. It's Abike. I'm sorry if I'm butchering.
It's okay. How many times do we need to recreate the same thing over and over and over and over? You'll see most people say, "Oh, these are all different religions." I'm going to point anybody towards watching, even if you don't like him, watching the movie Religious. It's a good watch. But what it points to, and it's oh my God, what's the one who does the political commentary on HBO?
On HBO?
Mm-hmm. Bill Maher.
Oh, he does. Mm-hmm. He does it on HBO. Bill Maher.
Yep, sure does. Real Time. He's the one who worked on or brought us the documentary Religious, which a lot of people were riled up about, obviously, especially Christians, because he can't stand them, and he jumped on them, the hardest.
Oh, okay.
But again, this is about when you start bringing all these different religions in line.
Yeah,
they mirror each other so closely.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're not going to give you a bunch of answers, but the question is why?
Who is to be judged? So if the church says the Bible is true, it finally comes down to you. Are you going to believe the church or aren't you? So really, I won't deny anybody's right to hold these opinions. You may indeed believe that the Bible is literally true and that it was actually dictated by God to Moses and the prophets and the apostles.
And a bunch of other random people who apparently we're not going to acknowledge.
That may be your opinion, and you are at liberty to hold it. I don't agree with you. I do believe, on the other hand, that there is a sense in which the Bible is divinely inspired. But since inspiration always comes through a human vehicle, it is liable to be distorted by that vehicle. In other words,
and therein lies your crux.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be distorted by that vehicle.
Yep.
And I like to point out again that every vehicle in this case is a man.
Is a BMW?
Hey. Okay, let's talk about it. What's up, spiritual rebels? Thanks so much for tuning in to our channel. Don't forget, hit that notification bell Make sure you're subscribed for all of our regular uploads. Now, back to our regularly scheduled rebellion.
If we know one thing about mankind, is that man always changes the original intention of any holy person who's ever lived and hijacks the religion. Christianity is not the one unique faith where that's never happened. Yeah, trigger warning for sure on this one. I grew up Christian, pastor's kid. The hypocrisy of Christianity is the thing that drove me to the place of, is this the fruit of the true gospel of Jesus?
It's what drove us all there, sir.
It's not that Christianity is not true, it's that it's actually way more true than even Christians realize. The Essenes have the missing key of who Jesus was, an Essene master. There's so much proof in the Bible itself, but the most incredible one to me says,
seems like overwhelming evidence. I mean, it's world-changing.
Christ is not a person, but a state of consciousness. And so what good is it to just confess a person who lived 2,000 years ago, but you go on lying, stealing, cheating? There is a true way of Jesus. And I think that that's what everyone is really hungering for.
And now the reason why I brought earlier what I brought up about how many of the other religions are mirror so much. If we look at Jesus as a consciousness, that consciousness keeps repeating itself over and over and over again in every one of these religions that we talk about. The answer, the question is why? Because he's right. We're looking for that consciousness, the one that we work for in spirituality. Spirituality. The reason people would ask why we are spiritual, not because we want ours pure and unfettered by the trappings of all the things we don't want, the shackles of quote unquote religion, which is really just a political tool for order and control. That's why. We want to strip it down to its essence, just its consciousness, just the light path we need to walk.
Right.
Not all the rest of the nonsense that we just don't want. Now, what we wanted to point out here really is what he's talking about is these first two chapters, because the thing we haven't even talked about yet, even in all those books we talked about, we haven't talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls yet.
Nope.
We talked about all these missing books, but we haven't even touched on the Dead Sea Scrolls yet, which is crazy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know Thyself podcast. So stoked to dive into this podcast today because
I love this guy.
Yeah, you got some.
Every so often you come across a sect, a lineage of wisdom that feels so pristine in its quality that you just got to dive in. Before we even dive into who they were, what, the historical kind of evidence for what we're going to be diving into and all the wisdom today, what's kind of the promise, what can the listeners expect to, have some light shed on in terms of how this can be applicable to their own life? And yeah, let's go from there.
Well, it's a great question to start with because, I grew up Christian, pastor's kid in evangelical Christianity. And not a ton of my followers, I think, even know that I have a degree in theology from Oral Roberts University. I spent 4 years.
Oral Roberts. That's the real deal right there, sir.
The real deal.
Heavily studying hermeneutics and did some Hebrew as well, some Koine Greek, and just like plunging into the original translations of the Gospels, New Testament, Old Testament. And that was my passion at that age. But, fell away from Christianity at 23 and chose a different spiritual path for a while. And then really came full circle, like you said, back to mystical Christianity about 5 or 6 years ago, and dove into a whole new understanding of who this person was, this person of Yeshua. And so the Essenes, to me, really have the missing key, the missing secret of who Jesus was, because we're going to get into it more in the pod, of course. But The original gospel.
And again, the scenes, for people who don't know, was a Jewish sect during the time that Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus off
Yep.
shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Of Jesus was and is so different than the Christian religion's version of the gospel, which, if I had to distill it, I would say you have Paul's gospel, which is salvation by faith alone. You just have to confess Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and that's it. That's the gospel.
No, what did I say about this earlier?
Yeah, we talked about Paul, man. You can't.
Most Christians out there are actually not they call themselves Christians and we follow Christ. Mostly you follow Paul.
Yeah. And next time I see one of y'all, better call Paul.
You better call Paul.
Cool. But then you have the gospel of James the Just, the brother of Jesus and the 12 disciples, who writes in the book of James, faith without works is dead. Your works, your righteousness, your purification.
So there you go, right there.
Mm.
So this is what I was saying earlier. You got two books existing in the New Testament together that completely contradict one another. And that is a big one.
Mm.
Christians have been arguing back and forth with one another whether or not salvation, confessing, saves you, or whether or not it's faith plus works. That is a long-standing argument. It's like nature versus nurture out there.
Yeah.
The way you live and show up in the world as the Christ shows your salvation, not just what you confess you believe with your mouth.
Now, here's the big issue with that. Most of your, latter-day wayward Christians love Paul because then they can do whatever the F they want under the sun, never ever be judged themselves while sitting in judgment of other people, B.Simone. And everything they do under their Christian umbrella saves them by simply saying they believe.
And
doesn't that sound glorious to you if you're like, kind of non-committal and not really that rooted in wanting to actually do shit?
Mm-hmm. That's not even political ideologies.
Mm-mm.
That's just
social. That's just lazy Christianing.
Lazy, yeah. a lazy social construct.
The lazy approach to Christendom.
And that was really, if you read the red letters of the gospel, that was Jesus's message was, he even said to one group of people, don't come to me calling me Lord, Lord, and expect you're going to enter the kingdom of heaven, because when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was in prison, you didn't visit me. And he says, away from me, you who practice wickedness.
That sounds like works to me. And that was out of Jesus's mouth, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was Jesus. Okay, so it sounds like Jesus and James are in line. And James was one of his apostles, I believe.
Yeah.
You know who wasn't one of his apostles? Paul.
Is that what the... Is that why? That's why Jesus was hated on like that?
Jesus was already gone by the time, Paul was actually originally persecuting Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Before he, as we all say all the time, when you have a come to Jesus moment, he was struck down on his way to Damascus. So if you hear anybody saying that, I say it all the time. Like, I think you're gonna need to be struck down on your way to Damascus before you get this. Because that's what he claims caused him to basically go into a state of having visions and to stop persecuting Christians and to be converted over to Christianity himself.
But they're calling him Lord. I thought that was the whole thing. That's what Paul said. So those are two very different gospels, right? And where did Jesus get this gospel if it wasn't the, kind of blood sacrifice gospel of Paul? Where did Jesus
There's that blood again.
Yeah.
derive his teachings from? And when you trace back the history of the Essenes, this kind of early, 150 BCE through 300 AD kind of early Christian movement, it all makes sense. All the pieces snap together, and you understand Jesus was an Essene master from the Valley of Qumran, from a town called Nazareth. And the teachings of the Essenes are so remarkable because they're incredibly simple on one hand, and very much get us back in touch with what I would call like practical spirituality, being one with the earth, being one.
What?
Right.
What? You mean this man who studies theology?
One with the one.
Claiming that Jesus wants us to be one with rocks and sage?
I was getting ready to say.
I cannot.
With health in your body, not negating the health of your body, which was something that growing up as a Christian, that was not something we ever heard taught, that physical health even matters at all. Like everyone was sick, overweight, out of shape, and that was just normal because it just matters about going to heaven one day, right? So you get this new gospel of Jesus through the Essenes, and when you compare the Essene teachings from the Essene gospel of peace with the New Testament, you see, hundreds of correlations and crossovers between what Jesus taught and did in the gospels and the Essene teachings. And again, suddenly it makes perfect sense. So in short, what the listeners will get out of this pod, I think, and I hope, is a beautiful, simple path of the true way of Jesus that has been lost for thousands of years, that only since Edmund Bordeaux-Zeckley, found the Essene gospel of peace in the Vatican. And
I need hand claps for this right now.
Oh, yeah.
I think 1927 or 34, and translated it, that these true teachings, hit the collective consciousness of humanity again. And I think the universe.
Oh, Aaron, I hear words. I hear collective consciousness. No. You spiritualists in your words.
Yeah.
Where do we get those words from?
Crazy.
Satan. We got those words from Satan, Aaron, because of this, this man who studies theology and who was a preacher's kid who's been to theology school. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right?
Earth, rocks, and sage is very much satanic.
Is bringing them back at this time for a very important reason.
So much to unpack into the important reason of the time that it is right now for these teachings to resurface, because there's so much, like I said, practical wisdom to integrate into your life to merge heaven on earth here in our physical reality. So I'm excited to unpack all that. But first, let's dive into the historical context of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and where these were found, how these were found initially, and then we'll kind of go into really historically who the Essenes were, how they lived, and everything from there. But so for people who aren't familiar, what are the Dead Sea Scrolls?
So the Dead Sea Scrolls are pretty much unanimously considered the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. It was a shepherd boy, ironically, in 1947. The parable where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. A good shepherd is one who leaves the 99 to go and search for the one lost sheep and brings him back. And when he brings back the one lost sheep, he celebrates greater than, any other of the 99 that were still there. Well, ironically, it was a shepherd boy who lost a sheep, who went looking for his sheep in the Qumran desert. And I've heard two different versions of the story, but the sheep wandered into a cave is one version. Another version says the shepherd boy was looking for his sheep, saw a cave and threw a rock into it, and then heard a shattering of pottery. And he's like, what was that? He goes in and looks, and there's all these vessels of pottery in this cave. And the amazing thing, and this is how the universe works, right, is that these 2,000.
Not the universe.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
You know how much hell I catch for that?
Me too.
Year-old manuscripts in these clay vessels had been very pristinely preserved because of the bat dung that had fallen on them. Have you heard that?
I didn't know that part. No.
Yeah. They were covered in thousands of years of bat dung, which encased them even further.
I'm somehow going to probably get from this that, you know, what he's saying is batshit crazy because of what he just said. But, you know, whatever.
They're from, you know, the different bacteria that could corrode them and whatnot. So he lets the village people know, and within like, you know, a year or so, there's archaeologists down there excavating these caves. And I think they had, they found 11 different caves, and they're pretty spread apart when you look on the map. There's about 6 in one location, and then there's a few other dots up the Qumran Valley. And so over the next few decades, they have different scholars come in, and there's some controversy about this because the only scholars allowed in were all Christian scholars. There were no Jewish scholars allowed to translate these manuscripts, which a lot of people speculate was probably some kind of cover up from the Catholic Church.
Oh, things we've heard before. Christians, Jewish, Catholics, cover-ups.
Cover-ups.
Trying to make sure there's nothing in here that violates our religion, you know.
Hard to believe the Catholic Church would try to cover up something.
I know, right? Who would think?
My gosh.
It's impossible to think, but, you know, that's what happened, is that these Christian scholars came in and started to translate these texts and slowly surface them to the public. And it's the entire Old Testament in many different manuscripts, except for the book of Esther, which I find interesting because the book of Esther is one book in the Old Testament that talks very negatively about women. And the Essenes, when you study them, very much revered the feminine, the divine feminine, and they call it the earthly mother.
Oh my goodness.
And they didn't like that.
The divine feminine? What? Oh my gosh, Aaron.
That's the first time you even hear anything about women. How about that?
Right? All these times I kept saying, oh yeah, who? Men. And now all of a sudden, from something that's linked directly to Jesus, we have talk of women now.
Book so much. So they were preservers. It's actually one of the Essene creeds to preserve ancient wisdom. And it's one of the sevenfold paths of peace. The fifth path of peace is peace with the ancient wisdom, to make sure that we don't just let this sacred knowledge get lost, but we cherish it, we save it, and we pass it down to future generations, and we add upon it as we're given more knowledge by the universe. So,
Aaron. Did you say you add upon it, Aaron?
Mm-hmm.
Blasphemy.
You're not supposed to give back.
So they were sacred preservers of these ancient texts, and on top of that, there was 3 total segments of text they found. One is the Old Testament. Another one is texts that are unique to the Essenes, and they describe a lot of their ritual practices and whatnot. And I'm forgetting what the third section was now, but this hit the scene in 1947 and really like rocked the Christian, Catholic, and Jewish world. And when Edmond Bordeaux found the Essene Gospel of Peace in the Vatican in 1927, this was before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And
I'm guessing there's going to be a rush to condemnation here.
It's weird that he said like 1947.
Mm-hmm.
Like
my mother was born before that.
That's crazy.
May she rest. Yeah, both my parents were born before this.
There's 3 different books. There's called, one is a book of hymns, the Essene hymns. One is the Essene book of Revelations, I believe. I'm blanking on the third one, but there's these scriptures that
what's with him in the third?
He found that also were found in the Dead Sea. So if you read the Essene Gospel of Peace, I think it's in the second gospel, it says manuscripts identical with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it shows you all the parts that he found in the Vatican that were also in Qumran. So that, again, shows you that the Catholic Church has been covering up some pretty important manuscripts for a very long time. And it all really goes back to when Rome sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. They actually sacked the Essenes in 68 AD before they sacked Jerusalem. I think their thinking was, let's deal with these little outskirt movements of Jews first, and then we'll go for the big one in Jerusalem when we're ready. And they didn't differentiate between, they're all just Jews to them. They don't care about the different sects. But there was only 3 main sects: Sadducees, which were like the highest priestly class, the elites, you could say.
Those are the ones that the Bible always talks about Jesus did not like and was always railing against.
The Pharisees, which
Them too.
were like the lower but far more populated class of Jewish Orthodox priests. And then there were the Essenes, which basically ostracized themselves into the desert of Qumran because they believed that Orthodox Judaism had strayed and deviated so far from God's laws that they had become some kind of satanic cult almost in their.
And that's what I always believed why you hear about Jesus in the Bible very cleanly, actually railing against the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So it would make sense that he would be part of the Essenes.
Their animal sacrifices. Josephus writes of the unbelievable bloodshed in the temple in those days that every Passover they would slaughter over 250,000 lambs in one day. And the priests, he described the priests would be covered from the waist down in blood, and they had to have trench systems built out of the temple for all the blood.
Good gravy.
To wash out of the temple because it would just flood the whole place. And so you can imagine this like unbelievable bloodbath and genocide essentially of animals, where they believe that this is what God wants for us to atone for our sins. And the Essenes were like, these people have fallen so far from God's laws. They've been influenced by the Egyptians, the Babylonians. They've lost the true faith. So we need to preserve it. So they went to this burning wasteland out in the Qumran desert, which was preferable to them over the persecution they would face in Jerusalem, to follow what they believed was the true way of Judaism, which was actually not to follow Father Abraham as the Orthodox Jews did, but theirs was Father Enoch. And Enoch is a much lesser known.
You mean that man whose books aren't included?
Yeah. These Christians, they love their blood and their death.
Man, do they?
Own biblical character, but there's essentially one line, maybe 1 or 2 lines in the Old Testament that describe Enoch. And I believe he was like maybe 8 generations after Adam purportedly, so a very ancient person. And it says, Enoch walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. And so that means essentially he was so devoted and so one with God that God couldn't stand the separation of him being in a physical body, and ascended Enoch up to heaven with him. And so the Essenes were like, hey, that's our guy. He was the closest one to God, so close that God actually took him back to heaven. So he was the real first father of our faith. And so they.
What does that sound like?
Yeah.
God took him back to heaven. Okay.
They were followers of Enoch versus Abraham. They believed that starting with Abraham, it started to deviate. And then through Moses and so on.
Now, some other things I'm hearing here. Just, tell me if you hear it as well. Because at this point, Christianity does not exist.
Right.
No one follows Jesus. But somebody's still following a man, though.
Yeah, right. How about it?
Got 2 men, but we don't follow Abraham. We follow Enoch over here. So we're still taking our cues from what? Men. Got it.
And so forth. So the Dead Sea Scrolls really brought the Essenes back to the mainstream awareness. And from there, then we had Edmond Bordeaux's findings just a decade or 2 later that got published. And it's very clear that the universe has chosen this time to bring these teachings back to life. And when you study them and read them, I think it's very apparent why.
Yeah, so if it's true that the Essenes lived in the region of Qumran, then which is like where the Dead Sea Scrolls in the region were found, then it's highly likely that the connection between them would lead to them being the scribes or authors of many of the.
And they've carbon dated them and proven that they were written and came from the Qumran Valley.
Yeah. So the Essenes essentially saw themselves as the sons of light, like the true form, true sect of the religion in which they followed.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Let's skip ahead here a little bit.
To say that title was given to Yeshua by the Essenes. They were like, he's the anointed one. He's the Messiah that we've prophesied would be born. And if you read the New Testament, there's a few passages where they quote some Old Testament passage that says he will be born a Nazarene. And they said, look, he is the fulfillment of the scriptures. He is the Messiah that we foretold. And so the word Christ means anointed one. And so when we talk about Christ consciousness or the resurrection of the Christ in you, it has to be pointing to that principle, right? Again, what Christianity overlooks or takes for granted is that Christ is not a person, but a state of consciousness that, again, the Essenes were trying to merge back with.
not just a being, but a state of being.
Yeah, not just a being, but a state of being. And so what good is it to just confess a person who lived 2,000 years ago and say, that's my Lord and Savior, but you go on lying, stealing, cheating, all that stuff.
Which I've just always...
Hello.
So the problem, and like you already just pointed out, is that what I'm getting from this is that the Essenes were waiting for someone to and I guess by this time, Enoch had been gone for a long time. So, you're talking maybe a generation or a few generations.
Sure.
What I'm getting from it is that you still needed this man model to follow to even get to this consciousness.
How about it?
So all these years we're waiting for someone to carry themselves in a similar
way.
Yeah.
That is exemplary for us to model.
So all of this time, you still haven't found your way. You had to wait. You knew what the model was. You had an example, but you just couldn't find it without having someone in
in that
form.
Particular consciousness that you needed.
That's crazy.
It kind of tells you what the earth has been like all this time and why. It's because every time you see this, and it happens a bunch of different times, like there's a bunch of people on this planet who've embodied Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again, not just Christ. So it, like you're saying, and as he's saying too, it's not Christ, it's Christ consciousness. It's not Jesus, it's the consciousness of you walking this path, a very particular path, what we call in spirituality a light path.
And just think about that. Think about what we just said, because like this is unfolding for us. These things happening over and over again. How many years have we sat around listening to people waiting? Are we waiting for the second coming? The same way the same way they waited for Enoch to come back. You just waited for Jesus to come. Now we waiting for Jesus to come, second coming again. Even after he already been resurrected, even if we already seen other people walk the same consciousness path.
The same consciousness path. Yep, exactly.
It's crazy.
And, I mean, as we said earlier, people in the Jewish faith, they don't even believe Christ has been back again. Christ's consciousness has been replicated over and over and over and over and over again. And I feel like Spirit is saying, how many times do you need to see this to get it? But no, you still hide under your religious umbrella.
Right.
Because again, you want the lazy way. You want spirituality for dummies way. That tells you, oh, you don't have to actually do anything. Just confess. You're good. Apparently, you're not good. Apparently, what you should have been doing this whole time is embodying Christ's consciousness and walking a very particular path. But we digress. Hold on.
Is abhorred and like the Christians that kind of just use it as a scapegoat to say, yes, I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord
I think I just said that.
and Savior. Can essentially just like do whatever I want and I'm good. I'm going to the pearly gates, And it's like, okay, fair, no judgment, but at the
Not only fair, no judgment. Not only can I say that, I can do whatever I want, as I was pointing out earlier, and I can get online and judge people for their rocks and crystals. And I'll still be in the right. Woohoo, look at me.
the same time, like how that makes no sense to me that a Buddhist monk who would never kill a fly, who lives his life with so much compassion and service to others, who knowingly had awareness of, quote unquote, accepting Christ into his heart and didn't, now is going to burn in hell for eternity, pretty, just never made sense to me.
And you're not alone in that.
For sure.
It's the universal reason that anyone rejects the Christian faith, because Jesus said, you know a tree by its fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit.
Uh-oh. So I think we're diverging again from the Paul doctrine of simple confession.
And a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. So the hypocrisy of Christianity is the thing that not only me, but also my parents had suffered from so much, that drove me to the place of, this must be a bad tree if I'm seeing so much bad fruit. And anybody listening, even if you're a fundamentalist Christian listening to this, you cannot deny all the rampant hypocrisy you've seen in probably every church you've ever been involved in. I mean, I knew countless youth pastors getting caught sleeping with their youth students, laundering money, constant relentless fights for power and coup d'etats, overthrow attempts of pastors, spreading rumors, gossiping. I could go on and tell you stories about my parents suffering these things. And it's like, is this the fruit of the true gospel of Jesus, who said they will know you by your love for one another? That's how they'll know you're my followers.
So let's talk about that. Your average Christian, do we know them by the love they have for others, Aaron?
Hell no. Not the average Christian, no.
I mean, for me, it seems like they have a lot of judgment for others, a lot of vitriol for others, a lot of condemnation for others, but
condemnation especially.
Where's the love at, Christians? Where's the love? I want to include the Catholics in that too, because he talked about Catholicism and all of it. People who are in the other faiths, they tend to leave people the fuck alone.
How about that?
But the Christians and the Catholics, not so much. They're just barreling down your throat with their stuff that they be on. That, as you can hear him saying, is not in line with Jesus' consciousness or doctrine.
It's got to be a bad tree. And so it's a well-intended tree. Everyone who's a Christian has great intentions. You want to do right. You want to follow God. But this is such a nuance.
I am going to disagree with him. I don't think everybody who's a Christian wants to do good and follow God. I think they want the umbrella.
Yeah. Ella,
hey. I think they're
gonna love that one.
I think they want Christian covering while they do a bunch of unchrist-like things, like the Knights Templar, as an example, or just regular people nowadays walking around.
It's the but Jesus approach. But
Same thing when you said, like, I have the covering of the blood, Aaron, the blood.
oh my goodness.
So with the covering of the blood, I can now commit massive bloodshed, genocide, and homicides, and mass racism and sexism, all the isms. But the blood, though,
Jesus sure got a lot of blood, because
the blood. I mean, you gotta have a lot of blood to cover all that, right?
it's been a good 1,000,000,000 years by now. There's a lot of
topic, right? To understand how this original message of Jesus got diluted, hijacked, stolen by the Roman Catholic Church,
changed time and time again,
changed, censored, totally bastardized from its original intention, that you can't just read this book that's been around for almost 2,000 years and expect that it's exactly what the original message was.
That's the problem. And that's what we've been pointing out since the very beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
The issue, the biggest issue with Christians is they approach that book as if it was never touched, never tainted from its 2,000-year origin.
Been tampered with. That's just ignorant, right? You got to do your research and say, let me backtrace the whole history of this movement. Because if we know one thing about mankind, is that man always changes the original intention of any holy person who's ever lived. Through the ages, the ego of man, who wants to have control, always gets involved and hide.
Oh, let's see what I heard. Ego. Control. Man. Got it.
Hijacks the religion. It's not, Christianity is not the one unique faith where that's never happened. In fact, I would say it's happened far worse in Christianity than any religion in existence. I would say
same thing I said to you.
I think it's important to point out, like he just said, that it's always being hijacked by someone who wants control from someone who doesn't care for any of that.
Well, even in the case of Judaism, it's generally, and from that to Catholicism, then to Protestant, I can't pronounce the word today.
Yeah.
But Protestants, it's being hijacked from somebody else who wants the power and control from somebody else who has it.
Well, yeah, in those cases, but I'm talking about like specifically in cases where, the source was somebody who was more enlightened, organically. Somebody who was enlightened organically. It's like, they might have really been on their path. Like Moses, if Moses was really on his path, and everybody was just like, oh well, give me those commandments, and then you just do whatever you want with it. Like from there, like and it's like, no, like whatever, like this. We constantly go through this. It's like somebody that's somebody who originally were on their path. That wasn't their intent. They didn't want to do all of this.
Yeah. I would counter that. We don't see that a lot.
Right.
Where you see the people who really have because let's get real here, Aaron. This guy is supporting everything we've said. And he's going to theology school. Okay. So let's just start there. When you walk up to the average person who is a believer, just like he's talking about, just like some regular random Christian, and you start challenging them on Paul and the doctrine in the New Testament, might as well have 10 heads and scream, I'm a follower of Satan.
Because we ain't listening to Paul.
Well, we're not Paulites. And neither are you. Like what you're claiming is that you're a Christian.
But you really into some Paulism. This is Paulism.
Look, amongst other things, you're definitely a Paulist.
You're a Paulist. You're appalling. You're appalling.
You're not an appalling Paulist.
Your approach. That's what I'm gonna tell them next time. Your approach to Christianity is appalling. That's what
it's appalling because you, sir, are definitely a Paulist. Okay, none of what you're saying is Christian. I'm sorry.
This is polyamory.
This is
far as I'm concerned.
I can't.
Say that, and this is a very controversial statement as well, but I would say that the Apostle Paul is the single most influential human being who's ever lived, not Jesus Christ, because he's.
I'm sure Paul would love to hear that.
Well, Paul's dead, you know.
Because he stole Jesus Christ's message and made it something very different than it actually was. And now everyone associates Paul's gospel. And by the way, he called it my gospel over and over again. He didn't call it Jesus's gospel. He said, my gospel is the blood of Christ. Well, that wasn't Jesus's gospel, and that's the big problem. So to get back to Jesus's message, you have to study the Essenes and understand where Jesus came from, what he taught. And this is what's really cool, man, if you want to get into this, is the incredible amount of proofs in the Bible itself, not only with all these early historians, that prove beyond any shadow of a doubt, overwhelmingly, that Jesus was definitely a Nazarene Essene who essentially probably came to Jerusalem to say, yo, these people are so lost in this blood cult of animal sacrificing, thinking that this deity Yahweh wants blood to atone for sins. I got to go help these people. I got to go preach the truth to them because they're just falling farther away from God. And that was the compassion of Christ to go do that. And he probably knew they're going to murder me for it at some point. But what other...
Aaron, I think he just told us to get armed. Look here. Don't be trying to do bad stuff to us.
I think
it's bringing you the truth. And what did I say earlier? And before I ever knew this video existed, I have been saying for years, since I was probably in college and I encountered the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've been saying for years, you all are following Paul.
Mm-hmm. I think
you're following Paul. You're not following Christ, but you call yourself Christians, but you're following Paul. Plot twist. There was never a road to Damascus. Lies. Filthy lies.
So I
think there was a consciousness of Paul saying, you know what? I've been persecuting these Christians. You know how I could get some, like, even more power? What if I converted and became a Christian? Because you know Christians love a good redemption story.
Yes, they do. That's wild. Yeah, that's a wild.
Not theory. Saying it happened. I'm just saying. I don't know that we can, because I mean, Paul wrote it all. Can we trust him?
Yeah, I mean, he was a man. I mean, why wouldn't you trust him?
There you go.
But I think it's important though, like that, like what he's pointing out is that because that was one thing that always bothered me, like with the Bible, where like Jesus is this one to follow. He's the one to follow as the example of all that is, holy or whatever. And it's but nobody ever questions where he gets his teachings from. And it's wild, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know that people, they read the Bible and they're like, all these people, they get their they get their teachings from God or whatever, and it's like. So even like that, so even the whole Dead Sea Scrolls and Jesus following the
Yep,
Essenes
it's
thing,
still a man in source.
right? But
It's always a man.
but it's like that to most people is like it's blasphemy to if it's not coming out of thin air.
That is a good point.
Like
Well, no, from the actually no, Aaron. Let's backtrack. God is a
oh yeah, he is a man. I forgot.
got it.
Yeah,
Got it. God's a man.
but I mean
There's no
everybody.
thin air. There's just
But
man and man and man, man, man.
man, oh man.
Man, oh man. Oh my goodness. But I agree with him. The Essenes have a more well-rounded view of men and women.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the other thing because I mean, how could you not? I mean, if we're gonna sit here, if you're gonna sit here and like harp on blood and death constantly, I mean, let's just talk about how women deal with that all the time. Like,
Well,
so
when he's talking about blood sacrifices, inherently, I think in what he's saying here, he's not just talking about the sacrifices of blood that were spilled through animals. He's just talking about the human condition of everything being a bloodshed.
mhm. Now I know what he's talking about, but it's just funny that these religions don't they choose to exclude women who deal with exactly the same
Yeah.
the thing that you sit here and worship all day long, like that like many women have told me plenty of times what childbirth feels like. So it's like it's like, okay, we talking about blood and death all day, like how are we excluding women from the conversation? Like they
Well,
did,
their blood and death is insignificant, Aaron.
and they deal with it naturally. Like it's not even like this isn't something that I mean, there's an argument that can be made that you bring it upon yourself, but there's like, um, childbirth is natural. You know what I'm saying? Like menstrual cycles are natural as far as
Very
So it's
natural,
like,
yeah. But we're constantly out here talking about red rums on people.
mm-hmm. We got to deal with all of this constantly because you want to recreate the the cycle for yourself as a man. Like
Yep.
is ridiculous.
It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. Speaking of which, here's some ridiculousness though. Okay? Here's some ridiculousness straight from the evangelicals. While we're talking about it.
Merry Christmas to everyone except Jesus. Like, you really can't even write this. So, and the kicker is this article was technically published in like last year, over a year ago, and it's actually only gotten worse since then. So Christianity Today editor says evangelicals call Jesus liberal and weak. A former evangelical leader is sounding the alarm about the direction his religion is headed in. Guess what? It's not
his religion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just unpack Christianity.
Right.
Christ, a weak ass liberal, where his religion was entered. How much more proof do you need that religion is just a tool? It's an umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Ella.
What are you talking about? Your religion. Christianity is Christ's religion. But you just said Jesus was a weak ass liberal. So So what do you mean? Change your religion, sir. Make your own religion. How are you actually going to now, as an actual evangelical leader, continue on under the brand name of Christian? You know why, Aaron? Because Christians That's too strong a brand name not to keep using.
Ain't it? Mm.
Christianity has that brand recognition, man. You can't abandon that, even if Jesus was a weak ass liberal. I mean, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
I mean, you gonna get rid of Jordan and still walk around with his sneakers?
Well, Jordan's he's a very recognizable brand too. He's a big ass brand. So I'm just saying, you know.
Heading there anymore. It has arrived. In fact, it has arrived so much so, and I will be tagging the article somewhere up there, that young conservative, and when I say conservative, I mean alt-right, men have been flocking to the church as young women have been leaving the church in droves. And all of these young men,
I hear the word man again in here.
And are like, where are the good, wholesome Christian women that...
Wait. Again. What you mean Christian?
Right.
You just called Jesus a weak ass liberal. You're not a Christian. What are you talking about?
I believe in nationalism, and I don't want a woman to read too good. I just want her to know that eyes can read the Bible nice and right. And maybe she could give me 17 babies. Those are the men that are now flocking to the church.
17
and
is
there
a
have
crazy
been
number.
studies about that. And yeah, liberal, weak, woke. that is how they are calling Jesus, and how they have been calling Jesus, but also using the Bible as the cornerstone of all of their fascist rulings.
And still calling themselves Christians.
I would like to say, before you get into that, any man that's comfortable, and I know she's being satirical about it, but any man that's comfortable with putting that many babies in a woman, I'm questioning his Christianity and his faith.
I would like to say that Christians, I'm using my bunny eared air quotes, because at this point, if you don't realize that you ain't a Christian, you Paulites, and you people who think Jesus was a weak ass liberal. This is how the apocalypse happens, Christians and B.Simone. This is how the apocalypse happens, because this ain't your Christianity anymore. This ain't even really for you Paulites.
Right. How about that?
We've abandoned the Paulites level. Okay? We're literally at apocalyptic level of, let's just swap out Jesus because he was a weak ass liberal. Let's just slide our own doctrine in here.
Because Jesus, that's why they called him that, because they know he wouldn't have been comfortable. 17 babies. 17 babies. Jesus would have been like, wait a minute now.
Jesus was a Pisces. He was a Pisces. He was down for the downtrodden.
Why are you doing that to a woman? 17 babies.
Okay, Jesus was a Pisces and a martyr. If you know anything about Pisces, they tend to be a lot of times down for the martyrdom. You think any of these evangelicals are down for the martyrdom, Aaron? Probably not.
This last paragraph. Russell Moore resigned from the Southern Baptist Convention in 2021 after years of being at odds with other evangelical leaders. Specifically, Moore openly criticized Donald Trump, who many evangelical Christians embraced. Moore also criticized the Southern Baptist Convention's response to a sexual abuse crisis and increasing tolerance for white nationalism in the community. Here's the kicker. In the United...
That wasn't the kicker?
States,
right?
Christianity, especially evangelical Christianity, has always been a vehicle for these terrible things that have affected
Hello.
All of us. It's only recently that non-Black people have realized that it has always affected all of us. Christianity was the vehicle that was used, or the way that like this version of Christianity is right now and kind of has always been in the United States. That was the justification for slavery. That was the justification. Oh, the abuse, the Schmexual abuse crisis. Yeah, that was also done throughout throughout slavery.
So, speaking of that, let's come off break, and before we hop back into his video, let's talk about what she's talking about. Let's point to the type of places where these Christians who follow the, tampered with Bible that we've been talking about. Let's hear where they get some of the ideas to do what they're doing.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel where we deconstruct all of the things we were taught not to question growing up in the evangelical, fundamentalist, or conservative Christian churches. My name is Christy and I grew up in the Baptist church, and I was a Christian until my early 20s when I deconstructed everything I knew about my faith and about my reality, and I set off on a journey to find truth. It has now been 13 plus years later.
How many of these people started out exactly
I have not
where
found...
we're talking? They start out in the faith first.
Mm-hmm.
They don't start out away from it. They start out in it, right?
Yeah, that's always kind of interesting too. Yeah,
because I'm the same way. I started out in it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So you start out in it, and then you start asking certain questions like, what the hell? This doesn't make any sense. But let's get to what she's talking about that really, really struck me.
The fourth passage that I had a really difficult time with, that I still cannot find a good justification for, is in Deuteronomy 20, 10 through 18. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you.
I'm sorry, what? The colonial model.
Forced labor.
The colonial model. Mm-hmm. Smells like imperialism to me.
If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to the city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves.
I'm sorry, what now?
He said it.
Now, this is obviously Old Testament doctrine. So if you are a Christian, even if you were a Christian from way back, and how can you reconcile this? Because this says the Lord God.
Right.
How do you reconcile this God with Jesus from the New Testament?
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile those? Where's the bridge? Where's the bridge?
The bridge is over.
Yes, Paris. The bridge is over. Mm-hmm. In fact, the bridge is over. The bridge is over. The bridge is over.
Booty bye.
I can't. Cause what? This book is telling these white men they can do this shit. Why do you think that they think Jesus is a weak ass liberal?
Mm-hmm.
Because this right here is just telling them, Jesus, what are you talking about? God said we can make everybody our slave.
Mm-hmm.
God said we could show up to anywhere we land. We can go in under the guise of peace. have a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and then say, oh, by the way, you're going to be my slave. Oh, you don't want to be my slave? Okay, mass genocide for you. That's literally what this says. And that's why she can't reconcile it. Because this does not reconcile well with a fake woke Jesus in their mind. Okay, and if you were a white man that wants control, where would you find it? Would you listen to Jesus, even though it's called Christianity?
Mm-hmm.
Or would you swear by this right here? Because you want control over men, women, children, yep, livestock, everything.
And you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. So God is commanding his people to go around to all the neighboring cities, to offer them peace, to say, hey, we're giving you a peace offering. Would you like to make peace with us? And if that city agrees to being peaceful with you, you are to capture them and enslave them. You are to force them to work for you, to be your slaves. So right here, right on in the very beginning, it's saying to harm people that are peaceful with you, to force them to work for you, to enslave them. This is God specifically endorsing and commanding you to enslave other people, even if they're peaceful. Then it says, if they are not peaceful, then you are to just kill them all. Kill every single one of them, and then take the women and children as plunder and do whatever with the plunder that you want to do.
Yeah, I don't like that. She keeps using the word plunder. I mean, it's there, but ick.
Spoils of your war. What do you think that means? Like, what do you think it was intended when they said?
What do you think that means?
By watching the video all the way through, by liking it?
What do you think that means, Aaron?
I think it means that we the bridge is over.
Oh my God. Okay, so if your head hasn't exploded yet, because I don't know why it wouldn't have been. If you're a traditional Christian, you probably clicked off a long time ago. But if you're a spiritualist like us and you just want a little bit more background, then that makes sense.
I'm actually daring somebody to even listen to that and say, "Oh, no, they're misinterpreting." What are we misinterpreting?
Exactly. It's spelled out for you very clearly.
Because you already know.
And how do you pull it out of context? There's no other context.
That's one of the few things that is written plainly.
It's very plain. Okay, so the last topic we're going to hit is another controversial one that Christians hate, and that's reincarnation.
There's a couple passages in the New Testament that accidentally reveal that a lot of the first century Jews also did, or at least the Essene Jews who followed Jesus, because they ask Jesus, well, Jesus asks his disciples, who do people say that I am? Which is a weird question, right? What do you mean you're Jesus of Nazareth? Like, that's how everyone calls you that. That's not what he was asking. He was asking, like, who do they say I'm the reincarnation of, right? And they say, Lord, some people say you're the reincarnation of, or some people say you're the prophet Elijah. Others say Moses. Others say one of the other prophets. And he says, but who do you say I am? And I believe it's Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he says, blessed are you, Simon, for man has not revealed this to you, but your Father who dwells in heaven. So he was saying, like, I see in you the incarnation of the Avatar, is essentially what he was saying. And when the Essenes were practicing, as you described, trying to purify themselves back to the state of perfection, it was because they believed great spiritual masters want to incarnate into our planet to help us and to lead us. They would call them the teachers of righteousness. And every great once in a while, one of them pops in, the Buddhas, Krishnas, Christs. But they said a whole lot more of them can come here if we purify the body.
Oh my.
Mm.
So if more of us ascend to Christ consciousness, more can come and help others also to ascend.
Mm. Did they believe that as like a DNA type of thing? I mean, well, DNA wasn't a thing then, but
Yeah.
I guess like theoretically they believed that if two people got together that were aligned in that way, then they could bring forth, the next and then so
That's
on
interesting.
and then so on and
I
so
wonder if
on.
it's in one of those lost books that we don't know about.
Mm.
Because these beings on the spiritual frequency they operate on are not a match to this sick, quickly dying human body that's full of diseases and stuff.
I hear 3D.
Mm.
I hear 3D versus 5D is what I hear.
So we need to make the body a host for these higher beings so they can incarnate. And again, they believe Jesus was an incarnation of one of those beings. Maybe they didn't know who, but they speculated Elijah or Moses, one of the prophets. And it kind of shows you their philosophy of reincarnation, that they believed the body has to match the frequency of the being who's trying to incarnate.
Yeah.
I hear attunement, alignment, vibration.
No, it makes sense. Do you think that the early Essenes, like wisdom or secret knowledge, came like from Kabbalistic origins?
Oh, yes. In fact, Philo very much says that in his writings. The Essenes were almost picture-perfect copies of the Pythagoreans, interestingly enough, who were a Greek mystical branch who followed
Woo! Pythagoreans?
Mm. Where'd they come from?
That sounds like some stuff you like, Aaron. I'm hearing a little bit of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Stoicism.
I'm hearing some stoicism in there. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Pythagoras. And Philo says both of them, the Pythagoreans and the Essenes, were students of the Kabbalah or Kabbalistic students. And when you read the Kabbalah, it's very clear that they were, right? We see Jesus performing known Kabbalistic practices like baptism. Baptism is, again, not an Orthodox Jewish practice. So try to convince me Jesus was just another ordinary Jew and not an Essene when he's practicing a known Essene/Kabbalistic practice such as baptism in rivers especially, because they didn't want you to be dunked.
How much have you heard this in a church, Aaron?
Hardly ever.
In artificial water that was kept stagnant. Like Pharisees and Sadducees would build pools in their home. They would have rooms that were made into pools so they could do their 7 ritual washings every day. And the Essenes believe, no, it needs to be Mother Nature's water as the angel is supposed to be in rivers moving through the earth. So they would go out to the rivers to be baptized.
In the first centuries after Christ's death, Christianity was not a uniformly organized religion.
You don't say.
Each community had its interpretation of Jesus' words and
I'm sorry, each community had its interpretations of Jesus' words and teachings.
teachings. There was no official Bible, no central authority dictating rules. There was only a deep longing to understand the divine and existential questions. As the Roman Empire expanded and Christianity emerged as a new faith, its earliest followers were far from adhering to the orthodoxy that would later dominate the church. In fact, early Christians possessed a worldview that diverged from the rigid doctrines we know today. It was a time of spiritual experimentation, where the search for universal truths transcended the boundaries of a single earthly life. The human soul was seen as eternal, not confined to a physical body. The focus was not just on the present life, but on the journey of the soul through time.
Well,
This led many early Christians to consider the possibility that, after death, the soul would return to earth in a new form, as part of a continuous process of purification and evolution.
What did he just say? Continuous process, because the Essenes were into what? Purification.
Purification, yeah.
Among the most influential Christians of this period, Origen of Alexandria stands out as a proponent of reincarnation. He was not only a theologian, but a mystical philosopher, deeply influenced by the esoteric traditions of Egypt, Greece, and the Middle East.
I think
that's where the Stoicism.
I think I see some Stoicism.
Yeah, that's where the Stoicism.
Origen believed that the soul was not merely a temporary creation of God, but had an eternal origin and went through various cycles of life and death. In his most important work, De Principiis, On the Principles, Origen states that the human soul, after leaving the body, would return to earth in a new incarnation until it achieved complete purification. For him, reincarnation was a form of spiritual evolution. The soul, passing through various lives, would purify itself, refine itself, until it achieved unity with the divine. A concept very similar to what we understand today. Origen did not see reincarnation as a punishment, but as an opportunity for learning and growth.
Which is the only thing spiritualists are about. Learning and growing. So, hope this broke your brains, you crazy Christians. Not my true Christians, but crazy Christians. I hope this broke your brain. You are, in fact, ill-informed, underinformed, and sometimes just completely uninformed.
And straight up,
Yeah, you're a bunch of Paulists at best. You're a Paulist at best.
At best. Wow. Yeah, you're right. Because, I mean, at this point, like you said,
at worst, you are a dark walker.
You're
a
B.Simone.
Bloodshed origin.
B.Simone is, the B is for blood.
The fact that she was talking about blood and then he literally went into blood sacrifices and ew, why are you doing that? And ew, Jesus was a horrible liberal.
Right.
Who's fake and woke. And ew, we should just go in and sack this city and kill everybody in it under the pretense of peace. And by killing everybody, we mean the men. The women and children we should keep for our use. What the fuck does that mean?
Right.
Okay, so if you follow us through this whole journey, we ain't whistling Dixie. Everything we're talking is literally backed up. None of this was something we pull out of our butts at all.
It's out there. It's documented.
Documented. Okay, so spiritualists, we're not just walking around, oh my God, Roxanne Crystals and Sage. Rosemary and thyme. No. Absolutely not. So, what I would say, those who are on a spiritual alignment path of Jesus consciousness and continued purification, elevation, refinement, and ascension, please stay rebellious. Stay rebellious out here, okay?
Stay meditated.
And obviously you need to stay heavily meditated And what, Mr. Gardner?
And stay mindful.
Yo. Today's numerology is number 2. Number 2 represents balance, harmony, alignment, and dares us to live life in the moment. Thanks for watching, Spiritual Rebels. And don't forget, like and subscribe. And stay rebellious, heavily meditated,